I've been coming to Norway now for 5 or 6 years, I think. It's that long. My Norwegian hasn't improved, I'm afraid, so I still have to speak in English. But what I love talking about is CRM, and in those 6 years, so much has changed. And the other peril of inviting a Brit to come and speak is they can't come and speak anywhere without mentioning Brexit. So apologies for that, but there are some things that I think I have observed about what happened with Brexit that I think affects CRM, so we'll see. So I've basically been working mostly in the arts. My background is I'm a music graduate. I went to Cambridge University, I'm a singer, I studied music, and then nobody told me that singers don't earn a lot of money. So I quickly worked out that that was not a good career path, although I still do bits of singing. And I went into arts administration, so I managed artists, classical artists to start off with. And then I found a passion for marketing, sort of by accident really. I sort of fell into it and found that I was really excited by the prospect of seeing auditoria full of people enjoying, interacting with the art, and that was really what got me excited. So I worked in, I actually worked more in theatre than I did in music eventually, running marketing departments in large theatres all over the UK. And then I did a master's in business, and through that I decided to become a consultant. And I started off as a freelancer, just sort of helping people with their marketing, and then realised that you don't call yourself a freelancer, you have to have a fancy title like consultant to be able to charge more. So I did that, and that's what I am now, I'm a consultant. So, and I work with mostly arts and cultural organisations in the UK, and mostly on understanding their audiences better. CRM is part of what I do. I'm not an IT specialist, so I'll tell you in a minute what I believe CRM is. A lot of people talk about CRM, customer relationship management, and they mean an IT system. They mean a system, okay? I don't mean that, but inevitably systems come into it. You know, it's often the reason why you can't do what you want to do, or you need a better system for doing it. So it links very closely with IT and with digital. But I'm not an IT specialist. So I'm interested in the audience bit, in the customers bit, in the making relationships with your customers bit. And IT is just a method to do that, or not. In some cases, I think the IT can get in the way of that. So these are some of the clients that I work with, and as Heidi said, for the last 5 years, I've also been working a lot in Norway. Working with USUS on a project here, which is just coming to an end now, to help businesses in this region improve their CRM. And I can talk to you another time about what we found from that project. But it's been very interesting taking people on a journey, and I think it's fair to say that when we started 5 years ago, there was a sort of low understanding of what CRM was, what it could deliver for organisations. I think there was a perception that it was just for large organisations, and the brilliant thing is that technology, as I'll describe in a minute, has made it possible for any organisation to be cleverer in how it communicates with its customers. That isn't just something that only rich, big organisations can now do. So, the past. Let's just look back at where this all came from first. So CRM, customer relationship management, dates back to the 1990s. And the first term for it was relationship marketing. It was this idea that, because previously businesses would look at what share of the market they held, yeah? And it introduced this idea of share of customer. So instead of thinking we have 30% of the market, it thought the example that's given by the people that wrote mostly about this in the 90s, which were called Don Pepper and Martha Rogers, Americans inevitably, they were writing about this stuff, and they said the example they used was somebody who buys flowers. And they said, if you're a florist shop, your aim should be to get that person all the flowers that they buy from you during the year, a bigger proportion of them to buy them from you. So if they buy 8 bunches of flowers a year, you want to be getting the biggest percentage of that. You want to be getting 6 or 7 bunches of those flowers bought from you. So rather than thinking, what share of the flower market do we have in relation to our competitors, you should be thinking about each person, what share of their flower buying do I have? So it's a completely different way of looking at it. And it was this idea, they talked about a one-to-one future. They talked about communicating directly between the business and the customer in such an intimate way, a unique way that was completely relevant to that person. Because in the past, it had been mass advertising, hadn't it? Mass marketing. And they presented this idea back in 1990 of the idea that you could communicate with that individual person according to their needs, which at the time they had no idea that this was all going to be possible on Google and you being served up ads that are completely for you. No idea, but that was the vision that they created. So technology obviously now has enabled that one-to-one vision to become a complete reality, slightly creepily, I have to say, and we'll touch on that a bit later. But basically, the CRM cycle, this is how it works. So obviously, you have a person becomes a customer, and this is known, this is labelled in all. If you look at CRM literature, they use these terms. So I'll apologise for that because they're not very nice. But acquisition, you acquire a customer. And then the aim is to get them to repurchase from you and to keep going round this cycle, to keep repurchasing from you. And then at some point, so that's all about retaining customers, keeping hold of them. And then eventually, at some point, they drop out of that cycle and they stop being a customer. Now that could be their decision, or it could be yours. You could decide that certain customers aren't really worth investing in anymore. And this is a whole philosophical debate about this, particularly in the public sector, where a lot of my arts organisations are publicly funded. And yet we have to kind of look at the customer base and say, do you know what? It's not worth mailing these people a really expensive, thick brochure every 6 times a year because they never book a ticket. So we're going to stop doing that. We're just going to email them. So you could decide to terminate a customer, and in the business world, that often happens. It's unethical, completely unethical in my opinion. There are insurance companies, banks, who will have big CRM systems, and they will rank all the customers. This is taken to extreme. Rank all the customers from the most valuable to the least valuable. Credit card companies are the worst at this, because their most valuable customers are not the people who spend lots of money and pay it off every month, because they make no money out of that. Their most valuable customers are the customers who spend maybe medium amounts of money, don't pay it off, and end up accruing interest. So those people are actually more valuable to them than the people who pay more. And what will happen, so these will all be ranked, it will be linked to the telephone system. If you call in, if you're a valuable customer, you will have to wait less time to get through. If you're not a valuable customer, you'll be sitting there for half an hour waiting to get through. It's wrong, but it happens, and that's taken to extreme. That is how these customers are ranked.
So this means if I call my credit company and I answer the phone right away.
Yeah, you're in trouble. Exactly. They don't all do it. But you need to be aware that this is taken to extremes in a commercial sense. People will sack customers. They will get rid of customers. But being positive about it, the shift with CRM from old traditional marketing, it moved from concentrating purely on acquisition of customers to retaining customers. Because as Heidi said earlier, there is a lot of evidence to support the fact that it's 5 times more expensive to get a new customer than it is to keep an existing one. So if you're directing all your money and your resources and your time at that, at the expense of that, it's costing you more money. Yeah? If you concentrate more on this, of course you need to be doing this, but if you concentrate more on this, you should see a big result in your marketing expenditure should go down, because this should cost you less. So the basic principles of CRM, forgive me if you're very familiar with these, but this idea that customers are not equally valuable, and we can see people abuse that wrongly, but it's a reality. Some customers will be more valuable to you than others, and if you lose a very valuable customer, that will have a much more detrimental effect on you than if you lose a customer who's not valuable. So you need to know which those customers are. So some, inevitably, are worth investing more time and money in than others. Secondly, it costs 5 times more to acquire a customer than to keep an existing one. And so we see, with a CRM approach, we see businesses really focusing on what they can do to retain their customers, to get them to repurchase. And then the third principle of CRM is that customers have different needs. Different groups of customers have different needs from you. They are not all the same. And you need to be talking to them and reflecting those needs back to them. Yeah? So if you're talking to all your customers with blanket emails, your marketing just talks to your whole customer base, you are not following CRM principles. And where we have trialled methods of sending blanket communication, so say you have an email list of 5,000 interested people or past customers or whatever they are. You email all of them with the same message. So we tested that against splitting them into groups based on the way they purchase or their needs, and sending them specific messages related to that. Sometimes it means sending them less information, but it's more relevant to them. Typically, that approach is 5 times more effective than the blanket approach. You try it and see what happens and measure it. But that's a CRM approach. So the focus there becomes segmentation, which is the splitting of the customers up into the groups that share similar needs. So if you're a hotel, it might be that you have family customers who always come with the family, and you might have business customers. Now, some of them will do both. Great, we love those people, and you need to know who they are, but more or less, you will have segments who behave in certain ways. So there's a focus on segmentation and then personalised content, so sending them information that is relevant to them. So those are the sort of things that you would expect to see in a CRM approach. So because of that, we've seen a growth of IT systems to support that approach, the actual CRM systems. And the key elements of those are that it's all about data capture. It's all about capturing somebody's contact details and their purchase history. So if they're coming to the theatre, capturing their name and address when they book a ticket, or some way of contacting them, and then recording every purchase that they make. So in my world, I spend a lot of time looking at the database of theatres, because we can learn an awful lot about how people buy tickets for different types of events. And the segmentation is fascinating, looking at how different groups behave. And then sending them information based on that. So the CRM systems, the good ones, will help you capture data, and that can often be the hardest thing. We'll come back to that in a bit. And ideally, you need a method to identify them as an individual customer and to talk to them somehow, email, postal address, whatever it is you can gather. Obviously their permission to do so, and then their buying behaviour. So mailing lists, just a list of email addresses, is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about being able to identify a customer and their purchasing history with you. So that's the first thing. So then the second thing that these CRM systems do is help you to mine that data. Are you familiar with that term? To look at that data and see what patterns are going on. and identify the segments of customers that are worth investing in or that are interesting to you. And then the final bit of the jigsaw is then sophisticated communication methods to send targeted communications to those groups of customers and to track the response. So in an ideal world, you have a system where you gather the data, you gather all the purchasing history of that customer, you have tools with which to analyse that and identify what you want to do, and then some method of sending or pushing information out to them and seeing what happens. Do they buy as a result? Do they retweet? Do they open the email? What happens with that? And that you can use that information back in the CRM system to learn more about that customer. So we'll come on to it a bit later with social CRM, but you find that there are customers who receive communications from you. According to your systems, they never purchase, but they're very active in sharing your messages. They're valuable. Their engagement level is high with you, and you might decide that they are very valuable to you in pushing your message out to others, even though they never spend any money with you themselves. So this is old style CRM, this is traditional CRM. I still believe there is a place for this, but we'll talk a little bit about how things have moved on in a minute. So typically, the data, the customer data, this is in an ideal world how you would want it to look. So you have bookings or purchases, and at that point you gather the customer contact data and record the purchase history. You might have people phoning or emailing you or going on your website asking for a brochure, asking for more information. You collect their details and what they're interested in. And all of that gets tipped into a single customer database. So you've got all your lovely customer data in there. So that when one of these people becomes one of these people, it's the same person on here, they've just moved from being a prospect into a customer. And you can see maybe what triggered that. And so typically the sorts of things you would have in there, a single record per customer, that's really important. So you have a customer and all their purchases, all their communication activity is linked to that one record. You don't have transactions, so Mrs. Smith bought some flowers on this day, and then another line, Mrs. Smith bought some flowers, and they're two separate things. You have Mrs. Smith there, and all her transactions linked to that, so you can see how frequent she is. So you would have what she's interested in, perhaps the type of things she's bought, the value, when she bought those things from you, how frequently she buys them, and ideally, whether she responds to your communication. So what emails she's had from you, whether she clicked on them, whether she bought as a result of that, whether she unsubscribed from your